Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rao.
And Andy, I forgot to roll.
You did indeed.
Let me do that right now. We're going to do this on air, okay? Two.
All right. Well, Chris, this episode is already total chaos because we're out of order here, but the topic we will be taking upon ourselves to do in the next 20 or 25 minutes is design a tactile mechanic for tracking either danger or time. And whoever added this to the table put some examples of some existing systems. They say, think along the lines of a Jenga tower or candles burning out.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
Yeah, this is a good topic. I mean, I added it, so of course I think it's a good topic. Yeah, I've got some ideas there. Before we get into that topic, I want to say welcome back. Glad to have you back on the show. Last time you were out sick, but you feeling all better?
Yeah, and for the most part, I appreciate you and John covering for me in my absence. And I know it was really, really hard for listeners to not have me there. I'm sorry, I really feel your pain, but I'm back.
Yeah, I'm sure most of them just, stopped listening on that one, deleted it, and went and downloaded the early episodes and just did for that comfort.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I had one thing I wanted to bring up, and this is really going to be sort of me pitching to you a movie that I think you absolutely should watch as soon as possible.
Okay.
So this movie is called RRR.
Okay.
3 R's. It is a Bollywood movie, and I know basically nothing about Bollywood, right? Like other than having seen like a handful of movies a while ago. From what I'm told, this one was like the highest budget Bollywood film that's been made recently, and it stars two people that have never been in a movie together, but they're like big Bollywood stars, elsewhere.
Okay.
It's an incredible movie. It's it's all about it's set in 1920s, I think like the 1920s or so. So this is before India is its own, right? Like it's under British rule, right?
Okay.
So you have these two revolutionaries that the story is following, and they go from like people who are like pretty good at like fighting and stuff to basically full on superheroes by the end of the movie.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just this like slow progression of them like being able to like beat up a guy, but then by the end, they're just the one thing I will spoil is like one of them grabs a motorcycle that's coming at him, picks it up, flips it around, and then throws it at someone else. So yeah, but it's like every scene in that movie just sort of one-ups itself, and it's like a 3-hour long movie, so you wouldn't think that'd be possible, but it is like every action sequence is more and more and more, and then you just have these comically evil British soldiers and governors and stuff like that, just like treat like everybody who's brown, right? Like it's just like a terrible,
Sure.
In terrible ways. Yeah, it's incredible. It's really good. It's basically a giant revenge fantasy in which the heroes get to be like, full on superheroes by the end of it. So it's great. If you like action movies, if you like kung fu, like at all in any capacity, I would highly recommend you watch it.
Okay, well, I have to say, so my only exposure to this genre of like Bollywood action films is sharing YouTube clips of like ludicrous action sequences, and I'm curious. I would like to watch a whole movie. My impression from these clips is that they're amazing to watch, but I don't know if I could watch like a whole movie asking me to accept this.
Yeah,
because the sequences they always kind of defy physics in a way that Western movies don't usually let themselves do, even over the top Western action movies. And so does that describe this movie? And is it nonetheless, should I just dive in and see how it goes?
Yeah, it is. It is. None of it makes sense, right? Like there is an early sequence where you're meeting one of the heroes for the first time. He fights 1,000 people essentially at once.
Okay.
It's like a an angry mob, and he pushes his way through the entire mob to go go capture like one person out of that mob. So he fights his way into the mob and then back through it, like holding on to someone the whole time. It's like, so it's definitely incredible in all senses of the words, right? Like that you don't believe it. It's not possible, but it's also really fun.
Sure. Yeah.
Really fun to watch the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay. I guess My last question for you is: has this ignited an interest in that genre, or do you think just this particular movie hit you at the right moment in time?
I think this movie hit me at the right time. Like I don't have a lot of slots for watching movies in my life,
Sure.
in general. But I mean, it's if I'm gonna look for an action movie the next time, I would probably reach for, something in this genre. Again, it sort of reminded me a little bit like the unrealistic nature of like John Wick, for example.
Okay.
Right? Like John Wick, like he should not survive any any part of that movie, right? Like, he's running around using a gun like it's I don't know, like a baton or something like that, like the whole time. But yeah, it's that level of like ridiculousness where like you have to suspend your belief a little bit. I mean, it's no different from a Marvel movie, honestly.
Yeah.
Like it's just there's people with superpowers and they can do stuff like this. But I think for me, the thing that kind of sent it over the top is just the characterization of like the British people in it are just like, I mean, though, as I said, they're comically evil, right? Like, so you are rooting for your heroes the entire time.
Yeah.
You're like, how dare they? Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't know enough about different action genres to speak about this definitively, but it's interesting to think about the ways that the phases of unrealism that action movies go through. And, thinking about like those Bollywood over the top action sequences have a certain style of over the topness that is different from the over the topness that you get elsewhere. I think like if you were to look back at like Western action movies, like, your Bourne Identities and your whatever's over the last 20 or so years, or your John Wicks, one of the ways that Western action movies go over the top is by letting their heroes suffer just incredible damage with no lasting effects. But I don't think it's always been the case that action movies let themselves go quite so overboard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
for sure.
I don't know. It would be interesting to chart out the kind of the eras of action movie, of what we accept in our action movie. Versus when it doesn't quite feel right.
This is a bit grim. I mean, like, to that point too, I feel like when I was younger, I mean, probably when I was a teenager and stuff, like the quote body count in an action movie was a thing that you talk about a lot. You'd
Totally.
be like, oh my goodness, like 20 people suffered, suffered so much harm during this movie or something like that. And like action movies nowadays have gotten to the point where it's like you can barely count that number, right? And like the same thing in this RRR movie, like, it is like an incalculable number of people who died in the movie, right? Like, and like the point is not that, like you're supposed to count up that number, right? Like the point is just that it's like you're submersed in this version of the world in which it's like someone's finally getting revenge in the way that like they feel like they want to, like, and that they need to get revenge. And like honestly, in this movie, they set it up such that you're rooting for them, like you're on their side, even though the human cost to it is just obscene.
Well, if you watch some 80s action movies, one thing that's changed, I think one of the most egregious examples is the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando. But back in the day, it was considered awesome if heroes got civilians killed. I think in Commando, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the uncomplicated hero of the film, I think uses random passersby as like human shields in like a shootout. It's something egregious like that. And and the movie didn't expect you to do anything other than maybe kind of snort at it. And then, coming around to the opposite side of that coin, I feel like around 2015, 2016, 2017, we had this sequence of superhero movies that were basically a long stretch of like moping about how much they were hurting the world around them. We had, there was an Avengers movie where like 20 people or something were killed in an office building explosion, and the moral thrust of the movie was dealing with the weight of that, so I don't know. I don't have a direction I'm going with this observation. Just that it's funny in one decade you can watch something and it's awesome and part of the genre, and by the next decade you're watching the same genre but parts of it are no longer welcome, and there's new stuff that you're accepting unquestionably that the future generations are going to look back and roll their eyes at.
I know, yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of the nature of it. I mean, like, yeah, and I think if you can continue to watch an 80s action movie and, like, not feel anything about the human shield, like, that's a problem, right?
Yes.
Like, even if it was like, oh, this is so cool, back in the day.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. But I mean, I think we all hopefully evolve over time. But anyway, so that's my movie recommendation. This has been Chris's movie watch.
Okay. Well, I also have a movie related thing to do, and listeners, Chris and I, if it's not clear by now, absolutely no planning goes into these episodes.
Yeah.
But it also is related to the action film genre. So I don't know if this happens again, we're gonna have to change the name of the podcast and just start talking about terrible action movies we've seen. But yes. I watched a movie a while ago, maybe a month or so ago, and I played a role-playing game maybe a month or so ago, and I have ever since then been trying to bring these two things together. And so I want to pitch something to you, and it's not a fully formed idea, but I just want to hear your reaction. So the movie I'm talking about is Prey, which is the latest movie in the Predator franchise, and I found it a really enjoyable action movie. And if you're listening to this, then you should go watch it. And I will lightly spoil that movie, although the spoilers mostly amount to they kill the Predator at the end of the movie. So sorry.
So.
I know, spoiler warning. I was thinking about the structure of this movie, and I was thinking about, like I always do, how would you create this experience in a role-playing game? Because the battle against the Predator in a movie like Prey, or really in most any other movie, Alien or Predator movie, where you're facing off against kind of a mysterious and powerful monster multiple times across the stretch of the film before you actually have the battle where you kill it. In Prey, the movie closes with the final battle against the Predator, where the hero uses everything that they've learned, all the puzzle pieces they've learned, puts them together, and sets up a situation where they can defeat the Predator. Until you get to that point, the hero experiences... Let me put it this way. You're a player in a role-playing game, and you go through 6 or 7 scenes. Some of them are presented to you by the GM, and some of them are scenes that you create by describing what you want to do. And so the scenario is you're being hunted by a predator and a mysterious alien from outer space. And the scenarios are things like this. Like in one scenario, you might come across the bloody remains of teammates that have been killed by the creature. In another scenario, maybe you bump into the creature and you manage to drive it off, but not defeat it. Or maybe in another one, you bump into the creature and you barely escape with your life. But in each of these scenes, you learn something about how the creature works. So in one scene, maybe you notice that in one scene, you maybe just learn how its weapons work and that it has a cloaking device, right? In the next scene, maybe you notice a limitation, like, it can't see, it sees in infrared, so it can't see well. In another one, you might learn how its shoulder-mounted rocket thing functions, how it aims it. In another one, you might just learn about another one of its, that it has wrist blades that it can shoot out. One scene might just be introducing into the story, like a piece of terrain or an environment, like quicksand. And so when you feel like you have gathered enough pieces of information about the creature's strengths and weaknesses and the environment, you then announce to the GM that you're ready for the final showdown. And you assemble, you put together your scene with all of these things you've learned. I'm going to lure it into the quicksand and then use such and such to disable its shield, and I'm going to cover myself in mud to confuse its infrared, and etc., etc. And then you roll on the dice and you add the number of tactical pieces of info. You add that to your die roll, and if it's high enough, it succeeds. If it's not high enough, you almost do it, but the story continues because you missed something important and the creature got out of your plan. So my cheeky name for this is Brindlewood Prey, and I'm curious I'm curious if you would, what you think of this game and if you think it could work.
Oh my goodness. This whole time you're talking, I'm like, this sounds like Brindlewood Bay.
So it is. It is
Yeah.
taking the clue gathering structure of Brindlewood Bay, where you accumulate clues, and when you feel you have enough, you invoke that final scene where you roll the dice and you see if you've done it. But it tries to apply to the action genre. Now, I'm not sold on this, and I'm not planning to run it or anything. But I'm just curious. Do you think that there is something there? And if not, like, what's something that I could consider or change about that idea?
I mean, I think there's something there. I think the if you're doing combat, there might be a little bit of a letdown of it just coming down to a die roll where it's like, yeah, okay, like we got enough pieces of information, we roll the die and we kill the predator, right? Like I think you want there to be something else there. I don't know what it is exactly. Maybe it's just that like you get plus 10 on all of your die rolls for the rest of the like it's like your setup then gives you, like, going forward you get plus 5 to everything else that you roll, so then it's just like you're in charge of the situation at that point. And that can be pretty fun, where it's like like it has 10 hit points or 1,000 hit points or whatever you decide, and it's like every time you you attack it you're doing 10 or 15 or some, make the numbers go up accordingly. I can see that being pretty cool. I mean, I really like the idea of gathering information against, like explicitly gathering information to use against the thing. And I think if you're going to go with the Brindlewood Bay angle on it, which is just a really brilliant idea, I mean, you'd almost want it to be like you're building the monster or like the enemy as you're going along.
Yep.
So then the clues that you're giving them are like less like it can see infrared and more like it seems like it can see in total darkness or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. And then they might take a different angle with it. Yeah. Or like, or you notice that your dead compatriots have like this wound pattern or something like that. Right. Like, so as they're reacting to it and telling you like, oh, well, I mean, this thing has like huge claws and it has a floodlight on its, like on its head so it can see in the darkness or something like that, then you can describe that monster then as it comes to them. At the end. Yeah.
What I think that's a good point. What I struggle with is understanding how those scenes would individually be really fun, or have tension. So obviously some thought needs to go into it. But I was motivated to think about this just because I found myself thinking that this scenario would be pretty hard to pull off in like a traditional D&D style game, for various reasons. You would, as the GM, you would have to manipulate the situation pretty strongly to create that action movie, that particular experience of action movies that they do.
This just reminded me of, there's a game series called, I'm going to look it up real quick. I think it's Clock Tower. Have you heard of this before?
I don't think so, no.
It's a point and click or like, point and click adventure game. I think some later ones ended up being more like 3D adventure. But the idea is you're inside of like this clock tower or mansion or something like that. I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but I think that the idea is here. So it's a video game. You're going through this clock tower trying to figure out like some sort of mystery that's going on inside. But while you're in there, the scary monster is also wandering around the clock tower, but it's doing so on like a fixed time loop. Almost, but it goes slower than you. So like you can always outrun it as long as you don't put yourself in a situation where you can't outrun it, right? Like you get stuck in a corner or something like that. So the game then I think is there's a lot of like you maneuvering around rooms to like lead it around something, like lead it around a table so you can get out the door, right? Like that sort of stuff. Because it's always going to be coming at you. So then the whole game then becomes, how do you use the environment around you to trick it into dying or like, killing itself in some way. But I wonder if you could if you could take that tactic a bit too, of like, you do run across it, but it's very easy for you to escape. It's clear to the players, like you can attempt to take it on at any point. You can always escape, but if you try to take it on without any information, you're going to lose.
I like that a lot. What platform is that game series for?
I'm going to look it up. We can maybe drop a link in the show notes to this as well, but it looks like the first one came out in 1995 for the Super Famicom, and then the one that I was aware of was on the PlayStation. I think there was a port that was done on that. It looks like there's a couple of them. A couple of them that have varying levels of critical success, I'll say that.
Yes, okay. I feel like there are a number of recent games that have rediscovered the joy of that experience of being stalked around. I know Alien Isolation a couple years ago, and one of the recent Resident Evils is like you're going through a mansion and there's something else moving around. It's moving around, kind of pursuing you. I don't know. I like that a lot.
If you could do that with, I wonder if you do it like as a hex crawl, honestly, right? It's like hex crawl, like maybe you have information about like where the monster is at all times, or if you're within a space of it or something like that. But if you get a space away from it, then you lose track, right? So it could be going anywhere. There's a lot of fun ways I think you could have some asymmetrical like play and information there.
Well, what appeals to me about that is letting the players understand the rules of the game. It's still fun, and the fun is now empowered by the fact that you know kind of the rules by which the monster works, and you can start to play and experiment with them. I like that a lot. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll look into that game series. It reminds me, do you remember there's an old public domain series of games, I think. The one I played was called Daleks from Doctor Who, but I think it's just a common public domain game where it was a turn-based game, and I'm talking like mid-80s.
Okay.
You're playing on a grid. It's you and monsters are scattered around, and it's turn-based. You can move one space on the grid per turn, and every time you move one space, all the monsters move one space in a line directly towards you.
Oh, yeah.
And so the goal is to get the monsters to collide into each other without letting yourself get... And it's about that. It's about you can control the situation quite well, but you can get yourself trapped if you aren't thinking carefully.
Yeah. Yes. I think, was it Robotron, I think, is a version of that game.
Okay. Yeah, it could well be, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's a lot of like tactics games that also operate on that wavelength. There is Chocobo's Dungeon, again for the PlayStation. I think the PlayStation 2. I'm just like, I got the deep cuts today.
Okay, yeah. This is our show notes don't always get a lot of love, but I think this week we might have to go a little crazy on the show notes. So, my last comment here before we finally move on to our topic is I am running an Alien mini campaign in about a month, and so this is all super relevant. I don't plan to do anything really avant-garde with it, but this is helpful just in helping me think about what it is that is scary about being hunted or pursued by a creature. And so I guess over the next couple of episodes, if you have thoughts about what makes that work in an RPG context, I'd value your input. But it's probably time for us to move on to our topic.
Yeah. Yes, we should definitely do that. So the topic at hand, although I just want to play Brindlewood Prey now.
Let me reread the topic for us.
Okay.
It's design a tactile mechanic for tracking either danger or time. Think along the lines of a Jenga tower or candles burning out. Both of which are actual mechanics that are used by actual role-playing games, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I added this to the table, I was thinking about my wife and I were out on a date recently at like an outdoor beer garden thing. It's called German Park. It happens out in the Ann Arbor area.
Okay.
Every year. But there was a couple playing Jenga. They had like an oversized version of it, so all the blocks were, I don't know, like a foot long, right? Instead of like a couple inches.
Large enough to hurt you if it fell on you?
Yes, like it would legitimately hurt you. Like if there was a small child wandering around, you probably want to like don't. So they're playing on a picnic table outside on like somewhat uneven ground and stuff, right? So it's like the least good way to play Jenga. Right? It's like on top of a picnic table, the sun's going down, there isn't a whole lot of light and all that. So they're playing this Jenga game, and it is the most tense Jenga game I've ever watched in my life. And like a crowd started to form as they were playing, because they were both really good at Jenga, right? Like I'm not good at Jenga. Every time I play, it's like, you're done in 5 moves or whatever. but they just kept going. I mean, I think we watched them for 15 minutes,
Wow.
right? And like they'd have moves where all of a sudden, like they'd stop and like really like, check out where they're gonna, take the piece and like carefully tapping it out and like getting it and setting it back up. And like every time that they would successfully do it, people would cheer and clap. Like, it was this whole big thing. But it made me like think about how Jenga is can be such a tense game, and doing something that's very dexterity based like that, I think can add a lot of tension to like whatever game that you're doing. That's sort of like where this came from, like why I even put it on the table in the first place. I'm just wondering, like rolling dice is it's really fun and all that, but like it's not the only way I think to have a mechanical way of stating like the danger or like a time frame or anything like that. Yeah, so that's sort of my opening statement there. Do you have any initial thoughts?
What about a game where you, the player, and I'm thinking about your statement that there's something about that physical dexterity of you actually performing an action that is appealing. What if you are burdened in some way? I don't want to be stupid about this, but what if you yourself are burdened in some way? Like you have to wear, I don't know, you have to wear something each time you, I don't know, you have to put on really, wear a hat that you can't, you have to wear something every time you fail a roll or until it becomes impossible to play. I mean, that doesn't sound fun at all, but
oh, well, no, I like that idea. I mean, like, like making, like, I don't know, you have to wear sunglasses inside.
Right.
To, put on a heavy coat, like, turn off the AC in the house, like those sorts of things. Like, just explore that a bit. What would be the purpose of it? Right. Would it be just to like make things uncomfortable physically to like make the game itself uncomfortable?
I don't know, because I just kind of quickly spouted that out without giving it any thought whatsoever. But my sense is, when it became impossible to play the game in some, I don't know, maybe you have to hold some, you have to add something else that you're holding in your hands. And when you reach the point where you can no longer roll the dice, then you're done, or you're out, or whatever.
Oh, I really like that. Yeah, you just continue. Yeah, keep on having to pick things up. Like, so as long as you can get a couple fingers on a die to like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you would see people, I don't know, leaning down and using their mouth to spit the die across the table or something dumb. But it would be funny. I don't know if it's hard to imagine a role playing game in which that would add to the experience in anything other than a comical way. But
I mean, I'm just immediately thinking about like your first day of school, picking up all your books for the first time.
Oh yeah,
from all your classrooms, like, right, like, so you're in middle school and you're coming back with like literally 50 pounds of textbooks. Yes. I mean, kids these days, right? You just get an iPad and that's it. But like, back in the day, they'd give you all sorts of stuff. I mean, I think you could do something like that, or like your office workers who just keep on getting work added to them. So you just have a gigantic stack of papers and books and other stuff that you have to carry along with you. Yeah, I think you could have a lot of fun with the rules too. Like if you have to stay seated while you're carrying all that, or like you have to stand up. I don't know what in that system, I don't know what the point would be, right, for that, other than to give a sense of like overwhelm.
Yeah, I mean, it feels more just like a dumb party dare than a mechanic that would produce a particular result. But
yeah, I mean, well, what are RPGs other than a series of dares?
Right, for sure. Although it is funny, I've been replaying the video game Death Stranding lately. I'm quite fond of that game. And of course, thinking as I play, how would you do this in a role-playing game? And that is a game that is literally about how much can you carry without dropping it. It's a walking simulator, and you have to carry packages from one location to the other. And it's literally about, can you make it with this much junk stacked up? So I could see, I don't quite think that we have a killer game pitch in there, but somewhere in there is something fun about making the player actually have to handle a representation of whatever is going on in the game.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, what if there is... So the question, or the topic is like tracking danger or time. Maybe let's narrow in on one of those ideas. Do you want to try towards the danger angle or the time angle? I'm sort of feeling time personally.
Sure. Yeah. That works.
So like time to me, it seems like there's going to be something about it to where like you're going to hit a point at which something's going to end, or otherwise you can no longer keep up with it, right? So if it's like you're continually like the GM is just handing out books to everybody, at a certain point someone is not going to be able to hold all the books, right? And then the game is over.
Yeah.
Or I'm thinking about like spinning plates, right? Like you can spin plates as long as you want, but like at a certain point you're going to be too many of them and you won't be able to spin any more plates or keep them going like that. Jenga's like that too, right? Like it just, yeah, like physically at some point, like you're gonna have to stop doing it. Yeah, so like one thing that I see a lot of players do a lot is stack their dice in front of them. You know, like, so there's probably something there about like stacking dice or
absolutely
stacking stuff on top of each other. Yeah, I wonder if there could be something in the center of the table, like maybe you are just every to track sort of when the game is done. It's just everybody has a bunch of d20s and you just stack them on top of each other until it falls.
Yeah.
Or if you wanted to stick with something that is a little bit more thematic, you could just keep stacking books too, right? Like books are going to fall at a certain point too until you hit the ceiling. Yeah, you could do all sorts of stuff with that.
I'm intrigued by that dice stacking idea simply because that's such a ubiquitous game table piece of behavior. It would be really fun to gamify that somehow.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things that keep springing to mind, are some sort of physical manifestation of checking off time or checking off hit points, So, whatever, every time you hit a certain bad milestone, you hand over one of your dice, and then any die roll that requires the use of that dice, you just automatically fail. Or, I don't know, what if, like if you have your character sheet is arranged in such a way, those, when people put posters on like telephone poles with phone numbers, like call, I need a roommate, call, and like you tear off a piece. What if your character abilities are arranged on that character sheet as little pull off tabs, and then each time something goes bad or each time a certain time increment goes, the GM reaches over and rips a tab off of your character sheet. And then you no longer have access to whatever it was on that little tab.
Oh, I love that idea so much. Oh, that's super great. Yeah, especially you just had a stack of those. It's like, a lost dog thing, but it's like each of the tabs is like a fireball or something.
Right, yeah.
The bottom are like, 10 hit points. Okay, I like that. There's one other thing I was thinking of, and like let's start to kind of narrow in on our idea.
Yeah.
Was like, so with the stacking the dice thing, like what if on like one end of the table everybody stacked their dice on top of each other, and then whenever the GM, like whenever the game called for like doing damage to you or something like that, the GM took a d20 from like the opposite end of the table and kind of threw it at the towers to see if they could knock them over, sort of like
I love it,
cricket style, right? And so it's like if the whole tower gets knocked over, like you're out, or if like only part of it does, you take half damage or something.
I really like that. I'm also, what another characteristic of dice is that they're colored. So I like, what if the players are stacking their dice in some way? You have a couple distinct colors of dice, so there's like 3 colors of dice, and I don't know, maybe 2 colors can never be touching each other or something like that. So
interesting.
So, the players, each time something happens, the players add a die to the little thing, but they would have to play in advance a little bit so that you don't get stuck with 2 dice of the same color touching. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could do a lot of like fun stuff with that. Like where if there are color combinations that do end up happening, maybe it changes how the game goes.
Yeah, maybe
in some way.
Maybe some are good even. I don't know. Or
you can stack it.
I mean, you could get really, really silly about it. The facing of the die somehow could, like, which faces are out or touching or pointed at each other could mean something. But
so if you had the die and then you made it like a random draw to see which one that you pulled out, I think that's where you could have a lot of fun with the manipulation of like how they're touching. So maybe you have like 3 stacks that are in play at any one time, and it's like, so if like 2 white die touch, like a good thing happens. If a white and a red, like a neutral thing happens. If like a white and a black touch or something like that, like then it's a bad thing, or I don't know.
Yeah,
like you have some like sequences like that, but there's 3 separate piles that people can be playing off of. So you can manipulate like what's happening based on like, yeah, what when you draw, like deciding which pile to put it on, right? But you might back yourself into a corner, right? Like maybe like the good thing happening is somewhat rare unless you manipulate the ordering. Does that make any sense at all as I'm talking?
It does. You would need something that played with the tension of like, I could play this die right now and get us like closer to victory, or I could wait and hope for a better like to be able to make a better play, but like cost us some time or something. I mean, you know what I mean? There would need to be some kind of risk reward tension in what you're doing, I think.
Yeah, what if it's like there's a sequence of, and again we're kind of hand waving, I think, the actual game that you're playing. I think that's okay, right? The idea is like you come up with sort of a cool mechanic that to insert. But like what if it's okay, so like what if you have the 3 piles or there's 2 piles or something like that, you know, so you can manipulate that a little bit, but it's like you have to like cap off a sequence of them, so it's like, and it's additive. So you draw a white die, you put it down. You draw another white one, you put that one on top, and it's like, so now you're at like a good result. You draw a third one, if you put that on top, then it's like a great result or something like that. But to make it happen, you have to place a red die on top to like make it happen.
Yep.
Yeah, like so it's like you're building up, and like so it's a push your luck scenario. So if you get like 5 of them stacked on top of each other, but then you can't draw that red die to like make it happen, like you're sort of stuck, right? Like, yeah. But if you draw the I don't know, the black die or the green die, like or whatever it is, like your bad one, it's like then you lose your combo, right? From there.
It's funny. I think it's in our personalities that we are both going into complexity here. I think it's our, you know, Magic the Gathering and other fandom that, you know, we, as the more you talk, I mean, I'm getting really excited about this idea. You know, if you can play these 2 at the same time and you get a combo or whatever, you know, and like what I feel like surely there's a listener out there whose brain can take this kind of hodgepodge of ideas and make something a coherent, cool, complex system. But I will say, one thing we are losing is the amazing, dreadful simplicity of Jenga, which is, you know, try to put this on without knocking the whole tower over, right? And I do think you do lose some of the tension when you have to think too much about like, our dice are starting to not stack up in the right combos. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Would it help if we, you know, identified the scenario we're trying to track? Because we're talking pretty abstractly at this point.
Yeah, you're right. Let's go back to the idea of time. If we like the dice stacking idea, one way to do that and to remove a lot of the complexity we were just talking about is like there's just, I don't know, there's 12 D20s in the bag, right? And like you keep on drawing from that bag until you draw the red one, something like that.
Yep.
Right? Like so you have to stack them on top of each other, and they must stay stacked or the game is over. Or if you draw that like that last color, then the game's over.
Interesting. So is this how it would play? In the bag there are, you know, 7 blue dice and 3 red dice. And each time you take an action, you draw a die out of the bag and you stack it. And then your action succeeds. But the first time you are forced to place a red die on top of another red die, your action fails. Is that?
Oh, I'm thinking like that would be the end of the game.
The end of the game.
Got it. So you'd use this as a pacing mechanic almost. It's like, and I think like games like The Quiet here do this too, where it's like you shuffle like the last card of the game. And you take like the bottom 10 cards, you put the last card in there and shuffle them. So you're not really sure when the game is going to be done, but you have somewhat of an indication.
Yep.
And there, and I think it could be the same way. Like the game could be over that first pull. Right, like statistically, it's probably not going to be right. Like if you put 100 D20s in there, and only one of them is the game ending one, something like that, right? Like you'd have to kind of find where what the good number is in there. But I mean, I think that would add some fun tension to it. It's like, well, we're trying to accomplish this thing, but it's like you got to draw the right die, you know, so we can get that extra turn.
I haven't totally wrap my head around this, but I really like where it's going. So it calls to mind another type of board game that messes with time. Is there are some historical war games that introduce uncertainty around how long it will take you to execute a move. So I think World in Flames works like this. Some other these tend to be complicated games where you don't know how long your turn, how many moves you're going to have in your turn. Because, and I'm oversimplifying here, every time you do a move, there's a random element that determines whether you can keep going or not. And it gets less and less likely that your turn will keep getting extended as you go along. But it holds out this possibility, that you can, blitz your way all the way to Moscow in one turn if you keep drawing the right chits or rolling the right numbers. In those games, I like the uncertainty, and like you could plan for something amazing and have to stop after one move, or you might your turn might end up getting stretched out longer than you wanted to, and kind of tempting you into doing something that stretching yourself too thin, for example, just to keep the moment of your turn going. So that sprung to mind while you were talking about that, and that idea of like not maybe having a sense of when the game is ending, but not knowing exactly when you're going to draw the card or the color die that's gonna to finish it.
I really like that. I mean, I think there needs to be some sort of minimum number, right? Because I don't think you want to set up a game and then it's like, well, you draw the first one and it's done. Yeah, but like thinking about like the idea of turns, right? Of turns not really being sure of how long they're going to be. Maybe that's the way to do this die drawing mechanic that makes it a little bit more fun. It's like on your turn, you're drawing from your own bag of 6 dice or something like that. So like you could do 5 things or you could only do 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you always get your final action or something like that. I think there's something cool about that. The other idea that I had, and I don't know if this is possible, if you could get like one die that's glow in the dark, but it's the same color as the rest of them somehow.
Yeah.
And so you end up like you stack them, like, and so you tell this story together that's 10 turns long, something like that. And you know what happened on each turn, and then you stack them on top of each other, and then you flip the lights off and see like which one, like where the game actually ended.
Oh, that is fun. Are there like paints or something that you could put on that would be visible, like if you switched on a black light or turned off a glow in the dark or something, but that genuinely you couldn't detect on a casual glance?
Yeah, black light's probably the way to do it. Yeah, but I mean, I think there's it could be something really cool with that of you tell a story and then go back and then figure out that actually,
oh man,
turn 3 it was done. Okay, well, we do need to wrap this conversation up as much as I want to keep going. So, I mean, there's a couple of really good ideas in there. I love your idea of like on the telephone pole, tear off your number here. I think there's something there.
I've been thinking about this in the context of the Alien game I'm running, because that's going to have a lot of ways that a mechanic like this could be implemented. And like I said, unless we really nail this down, I'm not going to spring it on my players, but there, and not to spoil my Alien scenario, but the reactor is always gonna set to go off in like 4 hours unless you can get off the space station. And I mean, you have time constraints and you have damage constraints, and I wonder if we could nail one of these, especially that time constraint thing. I wonder if we could nail something down in time for me to try it in the game. I don't know. So
let's do. We can take that like offline, I guess, or off air, if you will.
Yeah, like, let's pitch this to some of our former guests and see if we can come up with a fun. If maybe using one of these ideas as the basis, we could come up with a fun time countdown mechanic that's not just simply watching the clock.
And that fits in with Alien as well.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, maybe giving it a specific game scenario might help, or maybe not. But yeah, you're right. We need to wrap up this episode because I think both of us need to get back to work. But
yes, a little peek behind the curtain. We're recording in the middle of the day today.
Yeah.
But so okay. Well, that was super fun. Like all good conversations, it ends with a lot of other ideas that you need to explore.
Yeah.
Explore elsewhere. But hopefully there's something fun in there for you, and hopefully your brains are going to dear listener.
Yeah, and if you do, we've said this before. If you do come up with a cool idea or you improve on one of the things we just did, please drop us a note. Our contact information is on gmdiscussions.com. And we do occasionally hear from listeners, and it's always a delightful experience. So far, it's been delightful. But let's not change that.
I guess don't be the one to ruin it. No, please reach out. But Okay, yeah, so let's do some of our wrap-up stuff. So Roll for Topics, part of the Roll For It Media podcasting network. Our sister show, The Splat Book, with John Corey and Kyle Latino, is going strong. Their most recent episode, I think, had the highest number of like me yelling at my podcast my podcast player incidents of any episode that they've had. It was really good. They did a great discussion about like likelihood versus difficulty, which seems like a simple topic, but there's a lot that goes into it. Yeah, so go give that a listen. I'm probably actually going to listen to that one again so I can talk to them in a calm and collected manner in person about some of their thoughts.
Here's what I want, Chris. I want you to record your live reactions as you listen, and then there can be a director's cut of that episode with your reaction, with your screams of outrage layered in the background.
Yeah, it was not screams of outrage on this one. It was more like, okay, we need to talk about this. And then, of course, like, 10,000 video game references that I needed to make while they were talking. Yes. But yeah, so it's a super good podcast. They did a bunch of actual plays this summer too that are also really excellent too. So yeah, go listen to it. We love it a lot. But yeah, so we've been Roll for Topic though. Yeah, as Andy said, please reach out if you have any commentary or questions or ideas that listening to this episode sparked. But I think that is about it for us. We are closing in on an episode number 100, so we will have more information about what we're going to do when episode 100 lands. Is how that's going to go. Yeah. All right, well, I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
Remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.